say, as I've embraced this new source of motivation, you call it a positive edge, my entire approach to life has shifted. I feel lighter and carry around far less anxiety about the future.
A lot of people are talking about is this very simple algorithm we run in our head, which is like, basically, I don't feel good enough. Therefore, if I work hard aggressively toward legible goals, I can avoid that emotion and keep going. And some people can grind like that for a long time. For me, I was running out of energy on that mode. Even now, like, I'm just not a person that's very motivated by money. So I need to find other ways to be motivated. And what happened is I started experiencing this connection to work, this aliveness, this sense of excitement and curiosity in the present. And that became like reward in and of itself. And so even though I didn't have any external outcomes from my writing or anything, I was getting this sense of excitement and motivation. And I had this deep sense early on in 2018. I was like, oh, I could write like this forever. And so I've just been trusting this feeling. I've been shifting between different kinds of work. I'm always just trying to make it work, trying to pay the bills, keep the journey alive. Because I don't really have that strong edge driving me toward money anymore. And so I've optimized over and over again for actually doing things I care about and doing things that give me energy. And yeah, it sort of changes your perspective on everything.
Welcome to Talking Billions. We talk about big ideas, big inspirations, big topics. We take on the hardest topic of all, money. How to make it, save it, keep it. But our conversations lead us to an even bigger question, what it means to live a rich life beyond money. My guests share their practices, principles, and evergreen wisdom. I'm your host, Bogumil Baranowski, author, TEDx speaker, and investment advisor to wealth creators with patient capital and an infinite investment horizon. I work with families and individuals who aspire to grow wealth over a lifetime and generations through disciplined, thoughtful investments in durable quality businesses while giving money meaning. Join me on this quest to unearth and share the wisdom of the ages. Let me share with you the podcast program disclosure statement. Blue Infinitas Capital LLC is a registered investment advisor, and the opinions expressed by the firm's employees and podcast guests on the show are their own and do not reflect the opinions of Blue Infinitas Capital. All the statements and opinions expressed are based upon information considered reliable, although it should not be relied upon as such. Any statements or opinions are subject to change without notice. The information presented is for educational purposes only and does not intend to make an offer or solicitation for the sale or purchase of any specific securities, investments, or investment strategies. Investments involve risk and, unless otherwise stated, are not guaranteed. The information expressed does not take into account your specific situation or objectives and is not intended as recommendations appropriate for any individual. Listeners are encouraged to seek advice from a qualified tax, legal, or investment advisor to determine whether any information presented may be suitable for their specific situation. Past performance is not indicative of future performance. None of what you're about to hear is investment advice. My guest today is Paul Millard. He's the author of the hugely successful book, The Pathless Path, Imagining a New Story for Work and Life. And now his brand new book, Good Work, Reclaiming Your Inner Ambition. To me, he's the ultimate guide to a life better lived. Paul, how are you? Nice to see you.
I'm doing good. Hopefully I can live up to that very high compliment, but thank you.
Well, I want to thank Matt Ziegler, who introduced me to your book and inspired this connection. So thank you, Matt. Paul, I want to jump right in. Matt knows that. Matt knows that he has played a role. What I call him the patron saint of Talking Billions. And now and then we both send guests to each other, which is fun because there are people that I had fun talking to, and I can tell that Matt would have fun talking to, and he does the same. So I really appreciate that. Paul, I have 1,000 questions about your books, but I want to start from the early days, if you indulge me. And if you listen to any of my episodes, you know that I like to ask about childhood upbringing and how do you think that time shaped you. I would also say relationship with money and work and the career path that you chose, if you can take us back.
Yeah, I think it's always hard to know how your childhood compares to others because you're sort of in a bubble. I grew up like in the exurbs in Connecticut, sort of in the middle of nowhere. I had two parents that didn't go to college, and were very committed to sort of the default path of success, which was great. Like, I'm very lucky. They really put like taking care of our family and stability first, and that gave me just like a really strong foundation to like focus on school. But because I was good at school, the thinking about like what to do in life was very simple. It was like the whole point of school was to get into a good college, which was then to get a good job. And I don't think I really ever thought about that until maybe the end of college. And that was when I started finding about all these really impressive career paths, and I sort of got like hacked by those. Like, they seem so sexy to me. And I really wanted to break into like investment banking or work at Google or work at a consulting firm. I didn't really care where I worked. I just wanted to work somewhere impressive. Mm-hmm. And I think I actually lucked out because I ended up in consulting, where you work on all sorts of different things. People are very curious. It was a place where my natural ability to synthesize ideas was rewarded and cultivated, and really loved that path for many years. So I'll pause there in case you want to go deeper.
No, I love that. And I immediately think of my own path, going to school, getting good grades. I want to share just one moment, one memory that I have. All my friends were obsessed about getting an investment banking job. So I went through the whole process. And I remember one of the last interviews, I was in Paris going to my grad school before I came to New York. And there was this one last person, a guy 2 years older than me. And at that time, 2 years, it feels like a lifetime. So I thought he knows so much more than I do. But he didn't look well. He looked tired, exhausted. And he said, listen, it looks like everything is lining up for you and you will get this internship. But honestly, this is a place where you're going to learn a lot, but you're going to hate yourself, basically. That's my memory of this conversation. He said, you're not going to have your weekends, your holidays. You're not going to see your friends. And this is just what it is. He wasn't being, mean or anything. He just had this moment of honesty. And he says, this is what it is. That's what you're signing up for. And I'd like you to know that. And he left the room. And I still get chills thinking about it because I decided not to take that opportunity. And
because of him.
Because of him. And wow. I wasn't sure at that point already after a lot of those interviews, but his words, I think, sealed the deal for me. And when the bank called me back, I told them, and luckily enough, I had an opportunity in New York that lined up in the investment management that opened up a whole different door for me and the field that I'm in. And I've been in for the last 20 years, managing money for others. But that conversation, that moment, really could have been one of those, sliding doors moments. You're in or you're out. And when you talked about it, I felt like this was the moment for me when I chose the other path and I never looked back.
Yeah, it's interesting looking back. You don't think a lot about like your personality or your makeup early on. You're just so desperate to make it into something. Like, I applied for a lot of finance jobs. I applied for investment banking and also like equity research jobs. But now with perspective and knowing what those jobs entail, it's very clear that something like equity research probably would have been great for me. Mm-hmm. Like, I love synthesizing ideas and writing and sharing ideas around that. But like investment banking would have crushed me. If anything, it probably would have been great to join because I would have burned out and probably quit a lot earlier.
That's the bittersweet. I want to ask you more about the Pathless Path that you're touching on. But the last book, you introduced us to the concept of good work. So for the benefit of the audience, how do you look at good work?
Yeah, so my first book is The Pathless Path, and that's really my story of what I might call like my deprogramming from the default path of success and sort of normal cultural benchmarks of what success looks like. And underneath that story, I sort of figured this out in talking about my first book on podcasts afterward. I had this dramatic shift from going from hating work and wanting to escape it. Well, not even hating work, like work was like fine, but I wanted to escape like the system I was in. Like I wanted to run away from the corporate world when I quit my job, and I really like did want to live on a beach and like not do anything and live simply. And for a few years I lived on less than like 35 grand a year. And I felt pretty awesome. Like I really liked that. But what happened in the space of my life, I created a lot of space. I really optimized around time freedom and working on random creative projects. I started to notice, oh, like I just keep writing. I have no motivation to writing, no motivation to write. There's no incentive to write financially. Like writing's a terrible thing to do for money. And I just keep doing it. But the feeling I had from doing it was so nourishing. And about a year and a half after quitting my job, I'm sitting in Taiwan, and I sort of just decided I'm just going to orient my path around this feeling, this connection to work. And like, this is it. Like, this is so much better than what I experienced in my previous path. I don't really care what happens to me. And over the last 6 years, I have basically committed to that. And I've been tested. There's been challenges. I've had to like take projects to make money along the way when I'm a little scared about my financial safety. And alongside that, like I've been paid. Like I feel like the richest person in the world because I'm rich in time, connection to myself, my family, and now my daughter. And just this sense of aliveness, which like courses through my veins now. And so I felt like I had to write a book talking about that connection and what it can do to your life. And honestly, I don't know how well the book will do. I sort of put it out on my own, but I think people that have experienced this are going to be like, oh yes, like I know what this feels like, or I've tasted it. I want more.
I have a quote from your Pathless Path book that I wanted to share. You say the Pathless Path is an alternative to the default path. It is an embrace of uncertainty and discomfort. It's a call to adventure in a world that tells us to conform. Is that how you feel?
Yeah, it's the Pathless Path was this phrase I stumbled upon in 2018 in a book by David White called The Three Marriages. My friend Johnny walked up to me a day after meeting me and handed it to me and said, you have to read this book. And that book was incredible to receive at that time because the phrase Pathless Path helped me put a phrase to what I was experiencing. I was experiencing this dual sensation of not knowing what I was doing, feeling really uncertain, feeling sort of ashamed of what I was doing, like wasting my former path and career, not really aiming at money, but also at the same time feeling this like immense sense of like wonder and possibility and excitement for what might be. And I loved that phrase and I just kept gravitating around it. And for me, what I realized is that these work scripts dominate our reality. They tell us what we're supposed to be doing in adulthood. It's almost as if we're in a movie, right? You can't just not work. You got to go to work, right? But where does that come from? We see it in movies and TV shows and the culture, and everyone just plays their part in this big script. And the reason nobody leaves that is because they don't have any other scripts to drop into. And so like the Pathless Path for me became this like vessel for me rewriting my own story. And the book eventually became basically this huge container for all these rewriting of scripts. And it's really like a pick and choose your own adventure where people can say like, oh, I love this. I'm going to remix it and make it my own.
I love the sound of that. And reading your book, The Pathless Path, I saw two sides to it. One is that, yes, you're embracing this new path, but you're also shedding a lot, right? So There are the moments in the book that you share that I notice is your regular paycheck went away. It's a very uncomfortable idea for a lot of us, right? And then the structure that you had, you have to show up somewhere at 9 or 8:30, whatever it is every day, that went away. And piece by piece, you basically created this space for this new alternative path to show up. Can you talk about that experience? Because it feels like something is missing at first, but it's not missing. Maybe it didn't belong.
Yeah, I think it was very painful and confusing process of unlearning and letting go. But in letting go, I opened myself up to new things, new ways of being, new ways of showing up in the world, new kinds of work that came into my life. And I think probably the most popular meme of quitting your job is replacing your income. Mm-hmm. Like people have this story in their head that if you're quitting your job, you need to replace your income. I did not equal my previous income or even come within 50% of it until my 6th year of being self-employed. But in those first few years, I was purposefully just sort of like trying to lean against every instinct in my head about what I should be doing. And I think that worked for me because I could sort of write about it. And as I wrote about it and read books about this process, I found that a lot of what I was experiencing was universal. It's sort of like if you read Joseph Campbell, he talks about like when you reinvent yourself or go through a life transformation, you're basically burning a version of yourself to the ground. And there's no like smooth off ramp in that process. It's confusing, it's painful, it's uncomfortable, but often at the same time, there's sort of this deeper inevitability. There's this part inside of you, which is like a fragment of your future self, which is telling you like, keep going, you're on the right path, trust it. But it's tiny and it's quiet at first, and it starts speaking up more and more. The biggest challenge with this is like nobody can experience or feel that tiny little voice enabling you to have faith and trust, right? And so staying connected to that and like releasing yourself to the journey is so hard. And yeah, I think what I have been curious about and writing about for the last 6 years is that journey and trying to help people not feel alone.
It's a question that I ask in different situations, and in my profession, there are a lot of, professional investors that went independent at some point, basically became, solo operators. And I asked them that question about the early days. How did you know you're going to succeed? And I think that question applies to you as well. How did you know you're going to succeed at this new path?
I never felt like I was going to succeed. The thing that helped me keep going, like I think, to be blunt, like financial advisors just have a way better financial model than I do. Mm-hmm. So like as soon as you have money coming in, it's going to grow in the future. I don't have that. So what happened for me is I had to redefine success. And success shifted from how did I know I was going to be successful to actually feeling successful in the moment. So it was a shift to presence and actually seeing different forms of compensation, like in the Emerson sense of the word, as a way where I could get paid. A sense of aliveness, a sense of connection to myself, showing up as a better person, starting to attract better people into my life. Like literally falling in love, like immediately after releasing myself to this path fully. And so a certain amount of magic started to show up in my life. And experiencing that is injected me with a sense that I actually was finally successful. So my previous path, I was chasing future potential success, right? And now I was experiencing actual success. And I love it. And so like there is no goal on my path right now. I'm already winning, right? Same thing with my books. When I put both my books out, I had already won because I got to experience the joy of writing a book, and it's delightful to me.
I'm hearing about the act of creation, but also the element of time, and you brought it up before, and I just reached 100 episodes of this podcast, and somebody asked me...
Hell yeah. That's amazing. 100's such a great benchmark for like... The only way you can do 100 podcasts is if you really care about it.
I really do. And I'm having so much fun with each and every conversation. But now and then people ask me, what are the things in common that all the guests have? And I don't know why, but when somebody asked me that the other day, I said, all my guests own their time. Like they have all different pursuits, and a lot of them are from the investment world, but not necessarily. Yeah. But to me, like the number one thing that I have as a realization towards the end of a lot of those conversations, and we talk about time a lot, is that they own their time and they can show up at 11 a.m. on a Tuesday and record with me. That's something I didn't always have. And I'm sure there was a time when you couldn't do that either. But you have that now. You own your time.
Yeah. And so it's really about shifting from like an economic mind to like a life mind. And so part of what my new book is trying to do is reclaim ambition. Ambition is not a bigger paycheck. It's a bigger life. And so today, until 11 a.m., I was hanging out and watching my daughter. I value that time at like $1 million an hour. So it's amazing. It's so good, right? And I mean, I think people just want it all. And like, I actually don't know if you can have it all. And this is just really painful because we've been so programmed as economic man rather than human man, right? And so over the last year, as I committed to watching my daughter 2 to 3 days a week and writing my book, my income declined steadily. And it was delightful again because I knew how I was getting paid and like the connection to my work, the time with my daughter. And I know at the end of my life, I'm not going to regret this. I'll probably end up poorer than most people on like my previous path and my business school classmates, but that's fine. Like that's not the goal. And I think this is really hard. And people often dunk on optionality. Oh, don't keep trading options for future options, right? But I think this is actually totally wrong. Optionality is incredible. As long as you actually buy your options or sell your options for time doing things you actually care about, right? If you're just capturing options for future career growth in a very narrow domain of work, that is cynical and silly, but most people don't actually do that. The thing I'm interested in is I did make some money in consulting. I had like 50 grand savings when I left. How do I use some of that optionality I purchased to then buy time, right? And I love buying time. Like that kind of optionality is pretty awesome.
There's this idea, and in many languages we say time is money, money is time. And I don't think it really works that way. I mean, to an extent, we're conditioned to think that way because we auction our time for money. Like that's how the system is set up. You have a quote that I don't have in front of me from Rolf Potts, who is a traveler whose book, Vagabonding, inspired me some years ago. And I think I've traveled more because of his writing. But in that book, and I'm paraphrasing the way I remember, and you might remember it better than I do, that basically we try to see some experiences in life as a cost, like put a price on it. Like this trip is $1,000 and that dinner is $100. And it's a limiting way of looking at things. And, it's just the experience for the sake of the experience. And I think I would go as far as say that the most valuable experiences in life, there is no price tag on them. Like your time with your daughter today, you can't put a price tag on it, right? So when you really think of life as a collection of experiences, the ones we really remember are the ones that probably cost nothing in a traditional, sense, that there was an actual price tag and an invoice.
Yeah, and I think this is hard to experience if you never step off the financial trajectory of like always increasing your income. After I quit my job, I wasn't making any money. I didn't have projects coming in. I was trying to find freelance projects. And I quickly realized, okay, everything I spend today, I theoretically have to pay for, right? So if I'm buying a $15 bowl of ramen, I need to earn like $22, $23 before taxes and stuff to actually pay for that.
True.
Right. And so I quickly realized that actually buying time was more valuable. And so I went from paying $2,000 a month in New York to paying $850 a month in rent. Right. And that saved what? $1,200 times 12. That was pretty profound. And that's like $20,000 less I needed to earn to cover my cost of living.
Right.
And so that bought me psychological freedom and actual freedom to like pursue my art and the things I was starting to care about that were bubbling up in my life. And also just like time to figure things out. Right. And people just don't value this. I think we grew up, like, I think you're similar generation. I think we grew up downstream of like the most intense propaganda ever around career success and the default path. And there's a great side of that. Like, we have more prosperity and good jobs than ever before. People don't talk about this enough. People are always like, oh, the corporate world sucks. Like, yes, for some people, but also for some people, it's the best time ever.
Yeah.
Like, we have more high income jobs than we've ever had in the US. The middle class has shrunk because the upper class has grown.
Mm-hmm.
And people don't talk about this, right? They only talk about the middle class disappearing. But the downside of that is like, we often don't imagine other ways of living. And that's who I write for. I write for the people that are curious about different ways of living, different possibilities, different experiments. And there's enough of those weirdos to like read my writing and support my work for now. I'm not trying to like persuade and switch people's mindsets.
I think what you share resonates with more people than you can imagine. I used to have a very traditional New York job where I would show up to the office every day in a suit, and I wore a suit for 15 years. And then COVID happened, and it changed up our life. And my wife and I left New York. We lived in 2 cabins in the woods, and I was working from a sofa next to a fireplace in a tiny little cabin that had just like basic things and just incredible internet connection, so I could continue to work. But we walked every day, and I could actually hear my thoughts for the first time in a while. And I wrote about it, and I shared it with my followers, with my clients, how I appreciate this moment, like the Thoreau moment, Walden moment of being away from the noise. And these days we live between Miami and Dominican Republic, and I enjoy nature and peace. You mentioned the beach, but I do spend quite a bit of time on the beach, and I feel like I can actually think better and be of more value to everybody in my life because of the changes that happened. And related to that, I want to bring up something that really struck a chord with me in your writing. You changed the setting and the scenery of your life. You talked briefly about the rent going down, but then you went to the other end of the world, to Taiwan. Do you think that this new environment, plus the distance that you created, allowed you to explore, experiment a bit more than if you were showing up, living on the same street in New York and being surrounded by the same environment, even the same people?
Yeah, definitely. And I think something for me being in my like mid 30s when I did all this did help me slow down into the actual pace I needed to do this sort of contemplation and reflection. And yeah, I think if I did this in my 20s, maybe I would have just partied a lot and not really thought about it. In fact, I did travel a lot for work when I was in consulting, but I would like go for a week, work all week, grab like a nice dinner and like fly right back. I was in like this like just like never stopping mode. What happened in my first year after quitting my job is I started creating space, and I think I noticed, okay, this space is really nice. I need to protect this. And I was just pulled to travel, and I did this 5-week trip to Asia before I ended up moving to Taiwan. I visited a number of different cities, and I just felt like so excited about life again. And I realized I had become cynical in my career, and that scared me. And it also made me want to like chase the aliveness, the excitement. And I think for me, I realized I need this sense of adventure. I need this sense of exploration. Like, I have no desire to like own a house, nor does my wife. And I think we've had to like really admit this to ourselves and say like, yeah, we probably do need a sense of adventure. So how do we think about that with kids? Like, how do we think about exploration, new experiences, and things like that? And our kids will probably be similar too, because they're genetic offsprings of us. But yeah, and then in that trip to Asia, I had this experience. I'm sitting in Uluwatu working on a consulting project that was paying me far more than the $20 a night I was paying to stay in this surfer hostel. And I just had this feeling that like life was finally perfect. I had like arrived. And I was like, okay, I need to move to Asia. And it was in that trip after I went to Taiwan, visited my friend Irv, and I'm just like, okay, I'm going to come back. I don't know why I'm pulled to this place, but I'm just going to like come back. I'm going to rent an Airbnb for 3 months and just hang out and see what happens. And when I moved to Taiwan, I fell in love with writing. Then I fell in love with my wife, and like basically everything good that's happened since was downstream of that. And like, it's crazy. Like there's no playbook for this. And so when people read my books looking for a playbook, they're going to be disappointed.
I think it's more than a playbook. It's an inspiration that there is another way. And as you point out in both your books, is that we're conditioned to think that there's just one single way. It rhymes, it can differ, it's a range, but go to a good school, get a good job, be happy with the paycheck that comes, and then hope for good things to follow. And I think it works for some people. There's a lot of safety and comfort in that. And then there are others that realize there's maybe something else, maybe something different to it. And then you might have the opportunity to pivot and discover something else. There's a quote in your Good Work book that I want to bring up. You say, as I've embraced this new source of motivation, you call it a positive edge, my entire approach to life has shifted. I feel lighter and carry around far less anxiety about the future. Can you talk about that experience, that feeling, and what's a positive edge?
Yeah, so people talk about losing your edge, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I don't want to quit my job because I'll lose my edge. And what a lot of people are talking about is this very simple algorithm we run in our head, which is like, basically, I don't feel good enough. Therefore, if I work hard aggressively toward legible goals, I can avoid that emotion and keep going. And some people can grind like that for a long time. For me, I was running out of energy on that mode. And I think most people suspect they can't go forever on that mode. Maybe it's useful when you're like 23 and just need like some direction or focus in your life. But eventually that didn't inspire me. And like even now, like I'm just not a person that's very motivated by money. So I need to find other ways to be motivated. And what happened is I started experiencing this connection to work, this aliveness, this sense of excitement and curiosity in the present. And that became like reward in and of itself. And so even though I didn't have any external outcomes from my writing or anything, I was getting this sense of excitement and motivation. And I had this deep sense early on in 2018. I was like, oh, I could write like this forever. Like it seemed inevitable that I would just keep going. And it still feels this way. Like there's no fight, there's no tension. It feels good, right? And so I've just been trusting this feeling. I've been shifting between different kinds of work. I'm always just trying to make it work, trying to pay the bills, keep the journey alive. Because I don't really have that strong edge driving me toward money anymore, which is actually a big challenge. I've been thinking a lot about this. It's like, okay, if someone gifted me $1 million, I would probably let go of some of the work that funds my life. A good way to do that might be like actually going hard after that for a couple of years. But then that would undermine my whole journey. Okay, so I'm just going to keep going with what I'm doing. And so it's really submitting myself to my own desires and own natural source of motivation. And so I've optimized over and over again for actually doing things I care about and doing things that give me energy. And yeah, it sort of changes your perspective on everything. So it's always weird. Like, since I'm self-employed, this is my normal path. And when we had our daughter, it was sort of obvious. Like, my wife is self-employed too. We're on, like, we don't have good health care. Like, if I stop working, obviously, like, the income will just go down. And so, but it seemed obvious to us to, like, take 6 to 9 months off to spend with our kids. And so that is a pretty simple thing to do because we're optimizing for these other things that pay us, not money or continued success or status. And in fact, our lease ends December 9th and we have no idea where we're going to live. And we're sort of like embracing this season of uncertainty and we're excited by it. That seems hard to imagine, especially with a kid for some people, but it really feels super stable and great for us.
So the lease will expire. One option would be to renew it. Another option would be
renewing. Right? I don't know what the plan is yet.
Okay. I mean, I've been in situations like this in the last 5 years where we had a lease commitment and then things would change up. And I grew more comfortable with the idea. And it's very different than the previous, 2/3 of my adult life when I knew exactly where I'm going to be. But you know what? When you say it that way, I always think of people where the uncertainty comes not from within, but from outside. And I know so many people that went through, basically got fired in the last 5 years. I'd just be blunt here for a second. And they didn't know it's coming, right? So sometimes uncertainty can come from a place of safety because you feel like, well, it's a paycheck, it's a sure thing. They know me, I've been there for a long time. And then you realize, oh, maybe it's not the case. And the uncertainty appears in a different way. I want to share a quote from your book that resonates and rhymes with what you just mentioned. You said, in Pathless Path, as my money anxieties receded, I realized I wanted to go deeper, not with freelance work, but in my life. In those first 6 months, I experienced a remarkable sense of freedom and ownership over my life, which goes back to what we talked about, owning your actual day. You had to go through this leap to see that. I think it's very hard to see that sitting at a desk at a comfortable job in New York or Chicago or LA or London or Tokyo. You kind of have to leave to even see it. But is that how you feel, that you had to leave to actually notice that you're after something else?
Yeah, for sure. I had such little imagination of what was possible before I quit my job. Like, I was really naive, and maybe that helped me take a leap. But the most popular meme is like, quit your job and like become richer, start a company, take ownership of your financial upside, right? And I think that is popular because most people are scared and terrified and they want a comforting story to believe. I can't give people a comforting story because it wasn't comforting. It was uncomfortable. And so what I often tell people is it might suck, but it might also be worth it. Right? And so there's no other way. Like, all I can do is leave clues along the path. And I think for the most part, some people sort of meme themselves into thinking they want to quit their job and follow my path. If you're like terrified about like, oh, how will I make it work with the house and mortgage, and like I want to do private school and pay for all these things in the future, it's like probably not for you. Like, you probably shouldn't take this path. Like, if those things are priorities and primary in your life, like, you shouldn't follow my path. It's probably like, employment's great for like paying for those really nice things. Right? But the people I often attract with my writing are like, ooh, I've had this like idea in my head. I've had these questions. I get excited when I hear people like you talk about the uncertainty, the possibility, the adventure. And so, yeah, those people are the ones I love talking to, because like they don't care about what's on the other side. They just want to know, like, oh, how'd you feel? How do you deal with that? How do you, like, what are alternatives? Okay, like how could I remix my life? What are the creative ways to make money? Like, those are my people.
No, I hear you. It's not for everybody, but I think a lot of people would find it inspiring. I have a question from Matt Ziegler.
You know, I can't have Bogomil tell me he's talking to Paul Millard and not say, but I have questions. I have questions for Paul. Can I ask questions too? So, Paul, I'm loving the book so far. I'm only part way in, so I am not qualified to ask the questions that Bogomil is going to ask you. But I have one of my own. I hope I'm not interrupting. I'm interrupting, but I'm having a good time with it. So, in the tradition, which Bogomil will get, of Charlie Munger of invert, always invert. I mean, you pathless pathed us the first time. I see the inversion. So I want to ask about this. What is it about not just good work, but bad work? What is it about, you say, reclaiming your inner ambitions? That makes me think of rejecting your outer ambitions, or really rejecting their outer ambitions for us. How can finding out what the bad work is actually show us what not just good work is, but what our best work is? What do you think, Paul?
Yeah, I think so. For me, it's really about noticing, right? Noticing yourself. It's self-awareness. And it's noticing, okay, what are the kinds of work I'm drawn to? What are the moments I lose myself in flow? And just noticing those. And then also noticing the tension with, oh, this is such a slog to do. It takes me hours to start this task. Everyone has an experience of, like, I sat at my desk all day, then I finally did the freaking task, right? All you're doing is noticing those. And my journey has just been about shifting that balance slowly more toward good work. Now, it's not perfect. I often have to like go into hustle mode a little bit and try to sell some training projects, which I call my like good enough work. But that is to make sure I don't have to do like the project-based consulting projects. I don't want to do those. Those are only break glass in case of emergency. Now, I will do them if we're like, okay, we're out of money and we're not going to be able to feed our daughter next week. Like, I'm going to go into grind mode. I'm going to do the bad work. I will take the paycheck. I'm not that stubborn. But as long as possible, and as long as I'm keep checking in with our family and how we're setting up our life and the money and our safety and our needs are met, I'm going to keep shifting recklessly toward good work.
No, I love the sound of it. And in your book, you say good work and good job are not the same thing. Can you talk about the difference between the two?
Yeah, so I noticed this over the years where people would self-gaslight themselves. Mm-hmm. Like the meme of, oh, because you have a good job, you should be grateful is so strong, right? And so I like, this is what people would say. People would be like, yeah, I'm gaining weight. I'm very depressed. I'm unhappy. I hate showing up to work. I struggle to do the work. But I shouldn't complain. I have a good paycheck and it supports my life. And it's like, whoa, wait a minute. Why are you doing this to yourself? You don't have to be grateful for something that's causing you immense suffering, right? And I don't know why we think like this. Like, I think the script that like the primary goal of life is obtaining a good job has memed people into thinking that like some suffering is okay, right? And this is where my chapter on like rewriting your work script is so important, where it's like, okay, what are the scripts where you can actually redefine what work really is? Is work a constant struggle and a sacrifice you do for your family or for your goals? If that's your script, then like maybe the suffering's fine. But are there other scripts other people have used that can help you reclaim that? and shift your life in a new direction.
I love the sound of that too. We talked about time and money, and there's a point in your book where you say that, beyond money, once you are not thinking about money, then you start to think about what you're going to do with your time. And you're talking about the life that's less centered around work. What do you do with all that time? I think it's an overwhelming idea. There's a book, The Joy of Not Working. I think Zelensky wrote it, and I read it at the beginning of the pandemic. I actually sent a copy to a few friends that I think were taking their work too seriously. And I don't know if they appreciate me sending a copy of that book, but it was a book that introduced me to the ideas that you explore even deeper in your book. It's the question of, what do you do with your life when work is not the middle of it all?
Yeah, I mean, I do think we have this natural pull to do something I would call, I would still call work, but I would define work very broadly as supporting our community, helping our parents, raising our children, doing creative work, gardening, volunteering, all these things. So people just do this stuff naturally. And we know people do this because when they take sabbaticals from paid employment, they just start doing stuff. Everyone starts doing stuff. They remember, even fun things I like doing, playing basketball as a kid and things like this. So this is literally not a concern. You just don't have, I have this line where it's you don't have a lack of meaning in your life. You have too much job in your life, right? And so you will find stuff to do. This is literally not a concern. And if you're the kind of person that listens to podcasts, you're already a pretty curious person, you'll be fine, right? What we're scared of is we might not have work that pays us in money and status, right? And so this is sort of what I experienced. And Sasha Chapin has this great phrase, love the moat of low status. I found work in writing that I loved doing and I thought was worth doing. It didn't pay me in money or status. Maybe from other online internet writer types and creators, it was oh, this is cool. But for the most part, most people in my life thought I was pretty silly. Why would you spend all of your time working on something that doesn't pay you or generates any sort of respect? And I loved it so much I didn't care. I had to follow it. I had to go into it. And I learned to love the moat of low status. Because the other thing you realize is I actually think I have a huge competitive advantage with writing books right now. I'm doing them on my own terms, publishing them myself, and they're kind of weird. They would never get approved by big publishers because big publishers need playbooks and things like that. But I can write them on my terms to the people I actually care about. The people that read my stuff are hell yeah. I'm not the world's best writer. I'm probably not the world's best author or even producer of books, but it's weird enough and it ignites something in a certain kind of person that I'm hell yeah, this is worth doing and I'm going to keep doing it. And that's actually the status I've learned to love. I love status from people like our friend Matt. Matt is weird creative. I love it. And he likes my work and that's so cool. So I don't even care if I get status from the broader world. But that's what people fear when they fear, oh, what will I do? It's well, yeah, you need to solve that problem. You need to solve your status problem. You need to figure out who you want status from and how to get it.
You're touching on something fascinating, and it's almost as if I would like to remove the word status from the vocabulary. Just as a dimension, just completely remove it for a second, because status comes from outside most of the time. And even if we think it's the way we think, we actually borrowed it from somebody else. And I was born in Poland, and it was the last decade of Cold War Poland. Poland went through a massive transformation. Long story short, I wanted to go to business school because I thought that this is the place where it challenges me the most and I can really try to understand the world around me. I was just fascinated with how the world works. And I came from a family where there are teachers, doctors, engineers. And when I said I want to go to a business school, and it was a country that just went out of centrally planned economy, being in business meant working for the government in a government role. So it wasn't something that had any status. And I remember the conversations were, well, you should be a teacher, or you should be an engineer, maybe a doctor, but what does it mean to go to a business school? You're going to be managing a factory. What does it mean? Like, there was no understanding yet of what it means. And I just had a calling to go in that direction. So I had moments where I was making choices, not because people around me would say, this is something you should do, and it gives you the status. And then with the investment banking role, people were just shocked when I said no to the investment banking role. Because
I would have been shocked at the time.
I accepted a role in the investment management side, managing money for families in New York. I knew I want to be in that field one way or the other, and the opportunity opened up and I just followed. But the pay was a fraction of what the investment banking job offered. And so I made a lot of decisions that were not driven by, financial terms at all. And then all kinds of other opportunities appeared that were not aligned with what I wanted to do. So if you looked at it and asked, have you maximized your financial potential? I think the answer is simple, no.
No.
But I've had fun on this path that's been, course corrected. But I think cool things happen when you can relax the grip on the status and the grip on just the money as the measure of your accomplishment.
Yeah, until I quit my job, I had never taken another opportunity that lowered my salary. Like, I went to business school for 2 years and didn't have an income, but that was part of the path, right? And I knew my income would go up afterward. And so, I sort of wish I had that experience of actually leaving money on the table earlier. Because often when you're leaving money on the table, you're committing to something deeper. You're saying, I'm making this trade-off and I'm getting paid some other way, right? Right before I quit my job, I got offered another job for about 50 grand less than my current one. I was trying to still make my way and I'm going to make the future of work in organizations better. And there was this small consulting firm. They were growing, a lot of opportunity, but they couldn't pay me what my current salary was. So they offered me 50 grand less. And I was offended. I'm like, who the hell do you think you are? You can't offer someone 50 grand less. But I was thinking, it was like, okay, I do say I care about these things. What if I just went as a freelancer and did this? And since they're paying me a third, or they're offering me 60% of my current salary, what if I just worked 60% of the days?
There you go.
And tried to generate that money. It was now that's interesting. And so that was one of the first times I thought about working less. And as soon as I quit my job, the idea of working less was very sexy to me. I was like, you can buy stuff, but you can also buy time by working less.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so the whole formula of okay, how do I lower my cost of living such that funding my life actually doesn't take that much work? And in the space I created for the next 3 years is when all the stuff I'm doing now started to bubble up, the training and the course I have for my consulting skills business, the book writing, the writing online, the connecting with people. I used to just do open calendar every Wednesday, and I would have curiosity conversations with people from around the world. I did almost 400 of those. I only stopped them because now my daughter gets that time, as opposed to internet strangers. But all that stuff, it all made my life a lot better.
In your book, there's a moment that really made me think. You said how when you're an employee, the way I remember that part of the book, you basically sell the 9 to 5 or 9 to 8, whatever it is. And the way I read it is that it doesn't really matter that you could do it in half the time. Now, when you become self-employed, and I've been my own boss for half of my career pretty much, you realize that if I can do something in less time with a new tool, with a new way of things, or I have a template, or I've done it before.
It's so good.
The client is happy. They just want the end result. Was it done? And was it done the way they expect? Was it done better than they expected? Was it done sooner than they expected? It completely shifts the mindset where I couldn't leave work before a certain hour because nobody was leaving work before a certain hour. But it has nothing to do with the actual work done. And there's this mentality, and I remember people telling me stories and being so proud of it, which, I was young, so I would just silently listen. You have to be the first in and turn on the lights and be the last one out and turn off the lights. And I always had the big question that I never asked: what do you do between the two moments? Does it matter?
Yeah, but that's the hidden thing, is like, it doesn't matter. And this drives people mad, right? Because every company talks about like performance is so important. We're a meritocracy. It's a lie. A lot of it's bullshit. A lot of it's politics once you get to higher levels of organization. And I got to the level where it was starting to be a lot more about politics. And I was like, yeah, like obviously it doesn't matter if you do really high quality work, which I was doing. And I think that really bummed me out because I wanted to do really high quality work. And it actually took me a while to like find that level of intensity and challenge again. And I think I've found it with books for now, where it's like, okay, this is really hard. I can push myself and try to aim at that bar of excellence. But yeah, it's like almost impossible to do at higher levels of organization because it's much more about power, politics, and money.
There you go. I have two more ideas I want to bring up from your books. One is about good eggs and bad eggs. Matt pointed me to that part of your book.
This is Ben Hunt's idea. I love it.
And you write that Pathless Path is basically about releasing yourself from this way of seeing the world. Am I a bad egg? Am I a good egg? And then realizing that there's an infinite number of career paths. And it's all about building a sustainable business and life, which is something you've been hinting on throughout this conversation. But you and I, are we good eggs or bad eggs?
Bad eggs, and happily. So the idea comes from Ben Hunt's essay, where he's a farmer and he has all these, his chickens, but they have all these like deformed and weirdly shaped eggs, and they wouldn't be legal to sell in supermarkets because supermarkets demand systematized, standardized eggs that are clean, look polished, about the same size. But his eggs taste delicious, right? And so something is lost in the industrialization and standardization of things. And so I sort of thought about like, oh, this is the same way like jobs work, right? And so the good egg fits into the job-shaped container.
Right.
The bad egg can't fit into the job-shaped container. And so I experienced this when I quit my job, where like people really negatively looked at my life. Like they looked at me as a bad egg. It's just like such a great phrase. And it was so weird because I was trying to earn money. I was doing work I cared about. I was contributing. But everyone saw it as like, what are you doing? Get a job. And what they're really saying is fit back into the job-shaped container. This is the only way you're supposed to live life. This is how you prove you're a good person. And underneath work are these moral judgments. And we're all raised with these moral judgments. Every culture in society has their judgments, right? In the US, we look very suspiciously upon anyone not doing their part, not working hard enough, right? If you're on welfare, you're a bad person. People will say things like, oh, if I got laid off, I wouldn't even take unemployment, right? Because I'm so tough, I pick myself up by the bootstraps. And yeah, a lot of these beliefs are great for like the economy, but for many people, they're soul crushing. They kill the human spirit, right? And so often to like get yourself on the right path, you need to step into this like moral minefield where other people are going to think you're literally a bad person for quitting your job and like taking a break or doing things like this. And that's just like really hard to deal with. And yeah, I beat myself up a lot at first. My second book is really about shifting away from seeing myself as a bad person to actually being like, you know what? Like, I love writing. I love writing books. And to do it at my best, like, I need to design my life around curiosity, not working a lot, time flexibility, location independence, and I'm going to own that. And like, that's going to be my ambition. I'm going to like reclaim and steal back ambition from the culture. You know what? Screw that. Like, I don't care if people think this is like a bad thing to do. This is the most ambitious thing for me. This is how I can be an ambitious father, an ambitious spouse, an ambitious member of our broader world.
Towards the end of your book, Good Work, you write, "Yet I'm not alone in chasing bold dreams. Countless others are stepping out of their comfort zones, daring to search for their good work and doing things that are scary. We need more of this, and I encourage you to root for these people in your life." Where do you recommend we start? Somebody listening and hearing these ideas for the first time.
So if you're hearing these for the first time and you're like somewhat uncomfortable and you're trying to come up with narratives in your head, like, oh, Paul can do this because X, he can say this for this, like this won't apply to these people. All you're feeling is your discomfort and you're scared. And that's cool because it's proof you're human, like me, right? And the next person that triggers you because they're doing some weird path, just notice that. And try to just like embrace the space in your head and be like, that's really cool. I'm excited for you. Like, we are so bad at rooting for people chasing their dreams. The US may be the best of most countries in doing that, but like, we are so bad at this. Like, we make people feel so bad. People's default relationships with work are filled with negative emotions. The only way to get it more positive for many more people, which I think would be good for the world, is to like actively support the people around us. If people try something, if they're working on an art project, don't be like, aren't you worried about paying? Like, how are you going to get paid for that? Are you going to monetize it? It's like, no, just be like, that's cool. I hope you keep going. And I'll say it to you, like 100 episodes is amazing, but yeah, I hope if this is meaningful to you and you care about it, I hope you keep going. Because I didn't do like every podcast that reached out to me this time. But yeah, it's clearly this is something that really matters to you. You were super thoughtful in all you reach out. And it's like, I want to be part of that. I want to experience that energy too. And it matters. It's really important. And I hope you keep going, and I hope people keep going on the things that matter to them too, that are listening.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. And I have to tell you that the podcast is taking up a lot of my time, brings no money. It never intended to be.
Podcasts are terrible ways of making money.
But there was never any intention to monetize it. It was a passion project. And I wanted to keep it as such because the depth of the conversations and the quality of the guests and the space that I can create would be disturbed and interrupted in so many ways if every 5 minutes you would hear some kind of endorsement of a product or a service. And I just want my audience to experience my guests the way I'm experiencing them, with no interruption, 100% attention and presence, and nothing less. And I think that's why the podcast created this whole group of, I call them the patron saints, just like Matt. Tom Morgan is another person, quite a few people that introduced me to books and ideas and other people. And they say, you should talk to Paul. And I listen. And if Matt says so, I want to make it happen. So I'm very grateful that you said yes. Before I let you fly away, I do want to ask you about your definition of success. I kind of have a hint of how you're going to take that question, but I don't know for sure. So let me ask it. How do you think about success?
Well, what do you think I'm going to say? I'm intrigued.
Oh, you're going to put me on. So the way I look at it is it's a certain pursuit. And like just reading between the lines of everything I read and now listening to you, it's a certain pursuit, and it rhymes with the way I look at it. And the older I've gotten, I've been in the business 20 years, I took away the goals and the milestones. And I'm thinking of, am I enjoying the ride much more than trying to show off any kind of accomplishment? I'm showing up for my clients. I'm showing up for guests on the podcast. I'm showing up for my family and friends. And I want to have as much of the easy flowing part of my life than the things that you brought up and that Matt was asking about, what you would label probably bad work or bad parts, where I would feel like I really don't feel like doing it. And I definitely know what it felt like. And I shared it with somebody on one of the recent conversations, that I've been part of meetings with no end. And I've been in situations where I felt like my day is being eaten away by something I don't want to be a part of anymore. And I'm grateful that I'm no longer sitting in meetings that I don't want to be a part of. And I have clients that I'm looking forward to talking to. I have, my investments that I'm looking into and building portfolios for them. I want to have an environment and a setup that brings me joy. I became an independent investment advisor earlier this year, and it's been the most fun I've ever had doing what I do and nothing more. And the podcast and writing became an integral part of it, because I get inspired. A client asks me a question and I have a guest on the podcast. I bring it up. I feel like I have a new way of looking at things. It's a beautiful flywheel of, inspiration, ideas. But I don't want to take the answer away from you. So I'm very curious, is that how you feel? It's not a destination, it's a journey. And I can tell that you're having fun on that journey. And I think you're just getting started. I know it's been 6 years, as you said, but I think it's the early innings.
Yeah, I think for me, success is sort of an inner state of connection. And it's connection to myself, work that matters to me, the people around me, and something deeper, like a deeper sense of like meaning in life. And so success is really alignment with that state and how it shows up in my life. So yeah, it's very much the journey. But success really is about connection in the present. And for me, there's nothing really to aim at. And that's it. Like, are there things that matter to you in your life? And are you aligned and committed and connected to those? That's all.
I love it. Paul, this was incredible. I highly recommend both books. And I couldn't have asked for more. I think we covered all the highlights, and everybody that's intrigued and interested, the books have so much more. So dive in whenever you have a moment. And I know you have a podcast as well, so I highly recommend that as well. So Paul, thank you so much for today. It was a real joy.
Thank you. I really appreciate your questions.
You were listening to Talking Billions. We talk about big ideas, big inspirations, big topics. We take on the hardest subject of all, money. But our conversations lead us to an even bigger question: what it means to live a rich life beyond money. If you enjoyed the show, please take a moment and follow, subscribe, rate, and share with friends and family. We rely on word of mouth to promote the show. One click for you means the world to us. Thank you. Until next time, your host, Bogumil Baranowski.